Okay. Hello, friends. If you care about Miami and if you care about homelessness, you are in the right place. I'm Rebecca Fishman-Lipsey, president of the Miami Foundation. I am delighted to be here chatting with Ron Book, who's the chair of the Miami-Dade County Homeless Trust, well-known leader, lawyer, lobbyist, activist. Ron, you're a South Florida native, longtime friend of the Miami Foundation, incredibly powerful advocate for the needs of the homeless community. Thank you for taking time to meet with me today.
Thank you for the opportunity. You know, I think that some things take on an appearance of secrecy that were never intended to be secret. And one of those is the leadership that you all provide in the community on virtually every meaningful subject of the community. And in particular, we're talking homelessness and COVID. And as you know, Homeless Trust has been largely self-sufficient over the 26 and a half years of its existence. When you think about how we fund our continuum of care, the food and beverage tax, the HUD grant on the NOFA, and the state monies and those little pockets, all told about a $66 million budget. We've never turned to the community, not in 26 and a half years, and said, we need help. We've never said to anybody that we were running the trust in a way different than a business operates, which means you have capital reserves because you own capital facilities, and you have operating reserves because you never know when you're going to have a need that is unanticipated, or you have some economic turndown. We've run through all of our resources. We have no more. And we know that we are at a crossroad like no other time other than day one, 26 and a half years ago, a little over 8,000 people unsheltered on our streets, fewer than 900 total beds and or units of housing, and very little coordinated services. And you all have, if you will, without you in our effort to go to the community, we'd be nowhere. You all put up seed money for Challenge Grant to help induce folks in our community to open their checkbooks and help us. Because if we don't, here's the problem. We will put out old people, senior citizens on the street.
Absolutely. Let's dive into the eviction moratorium and how that's going to impact the state of the homelessness. And actually, even before we get in there, you deeply understand homelessness in our community. And I think for some people tuning in who don't have relationships with those who are homeless may have some misconceptions about what it is that leads someone to get into that state. So maybe you can spend just a second helping people understand all the different ways, especially this past year, that people have found themselves without a home.
Well, first of all, I think the average citizen sees the chronic homeless person on the streets. We have three categories of homelessness. You have the chronic, by a HUD definition, someone who has lived on the streets for 365 or more consecutive days, or have had 4 instances of homelessness in a 3-year period. They're defined as chronic. Chronic is somebody usually with mental health issues, co-occurring substance abuse, alcohol, myriad of issues. Your second category of homelessness are your episodically homeless. Maybe they've got some mental health issues. They go off their meds. There are different things that can cause that short episode of homelessness. And then you have situationally homeless people. And the largest percentage of what we are anticipating now coming out of COVID are those situationally homeless. People over my life anyway, have always thought that the cliche of people living paycheck to paycheck was BS. It's not BS. It's part of the reason why many teachers in our pre-K to 12 traditional public education system, oftentimes when they're speaking about homelessness, they refer to the person on the right, left, gee whiz, one of you will in your lifetimes. When unemployment rose the way it did, people got behind in the rent. They may be reemployed now, but they've spent all their resources. They're spent down. They were at home. Whatever they had went out the door.
Yeah, there's no
There
wiggle
were
room.
food on the table. And so, but different things, those mental health issues, the job issues, and while lots of people want to say the real cause of homelessness are economics, I would concede it's a major contributor, but it is certainly not the sole source. Economic disparity is what it is. I think that one of the things Florida did with the constitutional amendment that will increase minimum wage under the Constitution over a set number of years will help with some of that. But we're talking about now. We're talking about the present. We're talking about, look, we went out with we count homeless folks twice a year. It's called a PIT count. It's the acronym is a point in time survey. HUD requires every continuum in America that gets HUD dollars to count once a year. You pick any day you want, the last 10 days of January, they give you 10 days, the transitory population. They figure they can do it in a 10-day period nationwide. They limit you and I, Madam Homeless, Mr. Homeless, we're on the streets and somehow we end up in California a week from now. You limit it. That's the theory behind it. But 20 some odd years ago, we started counting a summer count as well. They count summer count because, interestingly, people think we get this mass migration from the north in winter. Our numbers have always, 2 decades plus, gone up in the August count as opposed to our winter count.
No kidding. Why is that happening?
Well, talk to a sociologist, talk to a second one, a third one, you got 3 different opinions.
Got it.
Nobody really has ever been able to give us something that we could really hang our hat on. It's an unexplainable phenomenon, why more people are here in the summertime. But I will tell you that we counted a week ago, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was like 900 people unsheltered. It's the lowest count we've had, the lowest unsheltered count we've had in almost 20 years. About 17 years ago, we were in that range for a short period of time. But remember, 8,000 plus unsheltered 26 years ago.
Wow, that's a
So
significant change. A lot of work has gone into that. But now I know there's a lot of eyes anticipating what happens when eviction moratoriums lift. And you're in particular very concerned about our elders. Maybe speak a bit about what wave you think is coming our way and why you felt like it was time to create a fund.
Well, let me just say to you that I don't remember a moment in the 26 and a half years that I've served on the trust board, and the 26 and a half years I've either chaired the finance committee, executive committee, or the full board. I'm the only individual that has served for the entire 26 and a half year period. I've agonized, I lay awake at night, and I don't find that cliche, if you will. It's real. We started back in December, end of November, beginning to look at what were we going to face when the eviction moratorium expired. Nobody then thought that the government would extend it this long, this far. And of course, the variant has gotten us to where we're at today. But at some point, sooner than later, the moratorium is going to go away. So back late November, December, we began to work with the clerk of courts, the judges, interested groups to begin to identify where were those 8,000 cases that had been filed pre-moratorium. Those individual cases represent somewhere close to 28,000 individuals.
Wow.
Average of 3 people per household. You got a lot of people. We began to analyze where the zip codes were, what other socioeconomic issues did we need to look at as we began to move up the road, if you will. And as a part of that, we began to develop messaging, education materials, postcards. We mail postcards to every household that we believe is vulnerable for an eviction action. We have communicated directly to the families of those cases that were filed pre-moratorium by the federal government. And now what we're doing is we've taken it, we've analyzed it, so we know where those individuals reside, and we're communicating to them. And we're communicating to people around them, because it's just as important, Beckett, for someone who knows someone that is homeless or about to become homeless as a result of the elimination of the moratorium to communicate to us so we can go find the people. We know where they are. We got to go zero in when we know it's somebody in particular. And let's face it, one of the things the trust has done very, very well for a very, very long time, and that's rapid rehouse people, maintain them where they are. Far less cost in dollars and cents, far less societal cost. We know exactly what it costs at Jackson Memorial when somebody ends up on the streets. We know precisely how many average times that individual is going to present at the emergency room at Jackson. We know how many times that will result in an inpatient day. We know how many average inpatient days those people are there. Here's what I promise you. Paying first month, last month, a month security and utilities is a whole lot less expensive on our community than that person ending up on the street for several months. That is what we fear. And look, the CDC told us in February of 2020, they started to heighten their messaging about seniors being isolated and quarantined in the first 3 weeks of March of 2020. We listened. We went out and contracted hotels. The quarantine and isolation hotel program has become the entry point into our continuum. We still operate 3 hotels in this town.
Wow.
We're still putting people in them. But guess who's there in a predominant way? Senior citizens. I've got the ALF, the adult living facility in North Miami called Mia Casa. We rented that thing March 2020. We've maintained senior citizens there.
Wow, still going
all this time. It's a building I've got to buy. If I don't buy that building, here's what I promise you. I don't have shelter beds for the people that are there, and I don't have units of housing that they can afford to pay for. Even if I paid 2 or 3 months rent, at some point it's got to become self-sustaining.
Yeah. So you've become convinced the best way to do this, knowing the amount of need, is to acquire the buildings themselves.
Look, we I lose it about now on this subject. My mom and dad are gone. My grandparents are gone. Here's what I'm certain of. If they were not, I promise you, my grandparents and my parents couldn't survive a single day on the streets. Not a day, not a day. The fact that we get people through COVID, the fact that we get them through COVID, they survive COVID, They survive COVID, and then we evict them or we put them on the streets to die. That is not all right.
No.
Shouldn't be acceptable to any decent human being that lives in our community. It should be unacceptable.
Through you, the way that you see every single elder in our community and that you see your own parent, and would we allow our parents to be wow, I'm emotional even just thinking and knowing that you, in leading this, you're begging our community stands together, make sure we don't have anyone's grandparent on the street evicted at the end of this crisis. And I'm amazed as well that despite what has been a horrific health crisis, the rate of COVID spread within our homeless community has been relatively low. I know that's been a huge effort. How did that happen? What strategy did you deploy to protect our homeless?
I could not be more proud of the village we live in than I am today. Think about the following. We didn't wait till March to start. On Saturday, February 22nd, 2020, go back and look at the calendar. Saturday, the 20th of February, 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Creole, we hit the streets. We didn't know a hell of a lot. We knew what the CDC was telling us. We were wearing gowns. We were wearing hats, masks, goggles, earplugs. We were passing out sanitizing wipe, hand sanitizer, masks, gowns. We later learned you could live without the gowns. We later learned you could live without the earplugs. We wore those goggles, we wore those masks, and we never stopped. We had to teach people that were chronic and on the streets what personal hygiene was about. I went out with the teams. I know what we did. We had to go to our shelters. We didn't have to preach as much personal hygiene habits in the shelters, because when they go to shelter, they relearn a lot of that. But we had to change our protocols. You have people that leave shelters every day to go get services. There are people who leave shelters every day to go to their jobs. Yes, because many people do work that are homeless.
Yes.
Their salaries, their pay is so low, they're still living in a shelter. So what were the questions that needed to be asked when people came back? We were oftentimes 10, 11, 12 mass conference calls a day with all of our centers, all of our staffs. What did you learn today? What did you find today? What do we do to adjust those things? So I must tell you that while I know that nurses and doctors, EMS, police, firefighters, first responders, frontline, they are everybody's heroes. My personal heroes are the 485 staff people that we captured, we put to work, sacrificing themselves and their families, living away from their families, sometimes for weeks at a time. Many of them ended up quarantined multiple upon multiple times. We tested over 23,000 people. Think about that. I don't care whether you were in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Atlanta, Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Washington, D.C. Nobody tested the way we did. Our positivity rate stayed between 1.2 and 1.3% throughout.
It's remarkable.
We lost 9 lives. 9 lives too many. I'll lay those 9 deceased against the dozens and dozens and dozens in other urban communities. We had fewer than 85 hospitalizations, while daily we would read triple figure numbers out of New York and LA going to hospitals, shelters having to be completely evacuated and quarantined. We never had to do that in one.
Wow.
Because those 485 people put their lives on the line and continue to today. We have vaccinated over 2,500 homeless people, sheltered and unsheltered. We continue to today to test people. We continue today to keep people isolated and quarantined.
It's really remarkable
to tell you how indebted our community is to those folks who risk their lives, because they were the ones on the streets every day, in those shelters every day, with people coughing on them and breathing on them.
Those 485 individuals deserve a standing ovation from our community, and to hear you describe what they have done at this point, it's a year and a half of effort to make sure that our most vulnerable in Miami are healthy, have a roof over their heads, are on a pathway to self-sufficiency. What they've done, what you do is incredible. And you're asking now for people to stand with you to make sure that our elders on the other side of this crisis don't end up on the streets. So I want to make sure people hear about the effort that you're doing, that they donate to this effort. So maybe just a quick explanation of what it is that you're raising for and how people can give to you.
They can reach the Miami Foundation and contribute. There's a link to contribute to the Homeless Trust effort to raise capital funds to buy buildings. Not 99 cents of every dollar, not 94 cents of every dollar, 100 cents of every dollar. There are no rake-offs, there are no salaries paid to people, there are no diversions, there are no fees, no anything. 100% of the money will go to help us acquire 3 buildings that we desperately need, or we are going to put people out on the streets to die. There is no other way to look at it. You know, when things got aggravated with Surfside, I'm certainly not blaming Surfside for anything other than to say that what Surfside has done with this re-examination of all of our high rises, we ended up with Crestview. We ended up with 50-50 in the city of Miami. I get a call at 4:45 in the afternoon from North Miami Beach City Manager Duke Story. Hey, we're about to have 300 people. We have 156 units. You got to help us house these people tonight. The call from the city of Miami on the 50-50 building came in at 7:45 at night on a Friday. By the way, both of them on Friday nights. I call my staff. Guys, here's where you're going. I'll meet you there. We deploy our team. They didn't say, hey, Ron, it's Friday night. They didn't say, Ron, it's after hours, you're paying me overtime. Get in the cars and they go. That's what
people have to remember when they read those stories in the paper, that there are human beings who that when that call came in, they had to show up, put themselves at risk, put their families at risk, and step up for the community. So like my hat's off to them and to you. Really appreciate you. We believe so much in what it is that you're doing. We put a match down and said dollar for dollar as people give to this fund, we will match. I think we were the first $50,000 in. I hope you destroy that match quickly, raise the funds that you need, help our seniors stay safe and healthy and housed. Our whole community appreciates you. Thank you for what you do. Really appreciate this conversation. We'll put the link in the chat so that people can give.
Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for making a difference. And I will tell you one last thing in closing. People don't see this side of me often. I've lost it on this part of it. But anybody that needs me to beg, I'll come without my knee pads on. I will get on my knees. I will beg. That's how bad we need this community's help. I remind everybody, 26 and a half years later, we started in the same place, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Washington, D.C. We all had between 8 and 13,000 people unsheltered on our streets 26 years ago. Tonight in LA, there are over 70,000. Tonight in San Francisco, they're hovering at 60. We're at 900. We need you. We need the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.